Are Israel Hamas committing war crimes in Gaza? As the war escalates for the fourth week, Israel and Hamas militant group face allegations of possible war crimes in Gaza. More than a week into their fourth war, Israel and Hamas militant group already face allegations of possible war crimes in Gaza. Israel says Hamas is using Palestine civilians as human shields, while critics say Israel is using disproportionate force. Who's right? It's hard to say, especially in the fog of battle. The firing of hundreds of imprecise rocks into Israel by Hamas and the Palestinian groups is fairly clear cut. International law provides targeting civilians or using indiscriminate force in civilian areas. Rockets slamming into Tel Aviv apartment blocks in a clear violation. But in Gaza, where 2 million people are packed into a narrow coastal strip, the situation is far murkier. Both sides operate in dense urban territory because that's pretty much all there. Because of the tight space and intense bombardments, there are few safe places for Gazans to go. A blockade imposed by Israel and Egypt after Hamas seized power in 2007 makes it virtually impossible to leave. As a grassroots movement, Hamas is deeply embedded in Palestinian society with a political operation and charities separate from its secretive armed wing. While Israel and Western countries view Hamas as a terrorist organization, it is also Gaza's de facto government employing tens of thousands of people as civil servants and police. So, just being connected to Hamas doesn't mean someone is combatant, and there are many in Gaza who oppose the group, and all are equally exposed with nowhere to run. Earlier this year, the International Criminal Court launched an investigation into possible war crimes committed by Israel and Palestinian militants during the last war in 2014. Both sides already appeared to be using the same tactics in this one. Here's a look at potential violations of international law. Urban combat. Palestinian fighters are clearly operating in built-up residential areas and have positioned tunnels, rocket launchers, and command and control infrastructure in close proximity to schools, mosques, and homes. A prosecutor would have to provide that the combatants deliberately placed military assets near civilians to benefit from protection afforded to non-combatants during the war. If France invades Switzerland, the Swiss are not prohibited from defending Geneva, including by putting Swiss soldiers, Swiss artillery positions, and so on inside Geneva, said Marco Salo, professor at the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. Because international humanitarian law applies to all sides in any conflict, the French could fight in Geneva as well. But here, the issue of proportionality applies on the big picture level. To continue the analogy, was the French assault on Geneva proportional to the provocation? Proportionality. Israel's critics often accuse it of disproportionate use of force. They note that the undeclared nuclear power with the region's most powerful military is waging war on a militant group armed with little beyond long-range rockets, the majority of which are intercepted by Israel's anti-missile defenses. As in the past, the toll in the current conflict is dramatically lopsided, with at least 200 killed in Gaza, nearly half of them women and children, and 10 in Israel, all but one of them civilians. Israel argues it has the right to eliminate the threat from rockets, including command infrastructure connected to it. It says it makes every effort to avoid harming civilians, including by warning them ahead of some strikes. But Sassoli said that in past conflicts, Israel had quite a large concept of what is legitimate military objective. Proportionality in international law also applies to individual attacks, but experts say proving a specific attack is disproportionate is extremely difficult. One would need to know what was targeted, what military advantage was gained, and whether it exceeded the harmed conflict on civilians and civilian property. That means that in practice, only the most extreme cases are likely to be prosecuted. On Saturday, Israel bombed a 12-story building housing the Gaza office of the Associated Press and the Al Jazeera news network, as well as dozens of private apartments and small businesses, including a law firm, a lab for blood testing, and a TV production company. The Israel military warned residents to evacuate the building and no one was hurt. The military says there was considerable Hamas presence in the building, including a command and control center, an intelligence unit, and other infrastructure used to coordinate combat operations, but it has provided no evidence. AP President and CEO Gary Port has said that he was shocked and horrified by the attack, and AP has called for an independent investigation. We have no indication of Hamas presence in the building, nor were we warned of any such possible presence before the airstrike. There is something we check as best as we can, Port said Monday. Sassoli said it would be completely unlawful to attack a media center, but it's impossible to know whether bombing was justified without knowing what the military was targeting. Strikes causing civilian casualties raise strong proportionality questions. On Sunday, Israel launched heavy airstrikes along the main thoroughfare in Gaza City, saying it was targeting Hamas underground military infrastructure. The bombardment toppled the three buildings and killed at least 42 people, including 16 women and 10 children. A day earlier, a strike in crowded refugee camp killed 10 women and children. Israeli media said that military was aiming for senior Hamas officials meeting in the building. Underground army. Members of Hamas armed ring rarely, if ever, wear uniforms or identify themselves in public. They go underground as soon as hostilities began, along with political leadership. The vast majority of Hamas supporters are not involved in fighting, which means they aren't supposed to be targeted. The International Committee of the Red Cross defines a combatant as someone with a continuous combat function or those engaged in combat at the time they are targeted, a wide adopted definition. So even if a building were filled with die-hard Hamas supporters, experts say it would be considered a legitimate target unless they were actively involved in combat operations. Thank you.